The title is Being with the Buddha. So this is about what it might have been like to be with the Buddha and to be in his presence, so actually be with him as a living human being. And 2 weeks ago, Vajradevi on this evening gave a talk about the teaching of the Buddha. I wasn't able to be here that evening, and I quite deliberately actually did my own plan beforehand and then watched and listened to her speaking, and that felt very good because I felt actually we're very much of one mind. There might be some overlap, but also there's something different to think about her specific title and probably slightly more wide-ranging title which I've chosen. So I'm going to include some favourite quotations from the Buddha and others, and like Vajradevi I would like to include the Buddha's followers, the Buddha's disciples, those who, well, through being in his presence, gained enlightenment. And that's very, very important because it's a manifestation for us of what we can achieve as human beings. And the example of the Buddha, but very specifically there's examples of his followers as well. And we have those lines in the threefold puja: what the Buddha attained, we too can attain. What the Buddha overcame, we too can overcome. So all of this is it's actually the wonder of having an enlightened being born within our particular vast sort of eons of history and who taught the Dharma. So very, very precious opportunity for us to follow that path and to follow the example of those disciples as well, who came from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of situations. And the Buddha, of course, was very much a human being. This is about humanity achieving enlightenment. So he could feel sick, he got old, he became unwell, and he had an utter wealth of human experience. He knew human psychology very well, and also he knew his world very well. He knew the cities, the towns, the busy places, and also, and I'll come on to this in particular, he knew the quiet places, the country places, and the wild places as well. And he had this huge momentum to teach and to share the Dharma. The Buddha walked a huge number of miles in his lifetime, and I did have an estimate of the figures, which I unfortunately can't find anymore. Amazing how far he walked. And he walked to teach the Dharma, to share his vision and to communicate it as much as he could at the level of his experience. And really he was laying the ground for those later traditions, which you may well know of as the Mahayana or the Vajrayana. This is it. He was saying, this is the basic teaching. This is the groundwork, and I will walk here, I will walk there, I will come back, I will answer questions, I will listen to people, and also I will exemplify how to live the Dharma life. I think my own response to the Buddha developed gradually, and gradually as my own practice deepened, I think, through study, through hearing talks, through ritual, through seeing particular rupas and images, and it feels very appropriate to be speaking here with the rupa, this beautiful rupa placed beside me. Yes. And maybe there were some significant moments in deepening my response to the Buddha, and some of those were when I went on pilgrimage in 2006 to the holy sites in India, which was quite an achievement for me because I'm such an unadventurous traveller. Actually, it was a bit of a miracle that I even got there. But I went on this pilgrimage with the Glasgow Sangha, and interesting things happened there, and it was a very strong experience for me and a challenging experience. But to share one, under the full moon we walked over the dried up riverbed at Bodh Gaya into the town and walked to the temple and walked to the Bodhi tree, walked to the place where the Buddha attained enlightenment. There were many walks, many journeys, and this was part of a pilgrimage, but a once-in-a-lifetime experience. So, yes, the presence of the Buddha and the impact of his presence on those who experienced him. And later also say a little bit about in relationship to the natural world as well. So I'm going to start with a favourite quotation from Bhante from A Survey of Buddhism, which I think I have quoted on at least one other evening here, which I discovered unexpectedly. And it kind of sent a tremor through me, I think, because he's talking about what we don't know about the effect of the presence of the Buddha on those who met him, who knew him, and we don't really know about the depth of their devotional response. And sometimes maybe even sort of think it was less than it was. So within the sort of energy of the space where the Buddha was, people were opening their hearts to the Buddha, thinking about how to express this when with him and meeting him, and also when away from him. So what Bhante writes there is, contrary to the received opinion, certain pages of the Pali Canon thrill with a quiet enthusiasm or glow with a serene happiness, or flash out in dazzling ecstasy, while striking expressions of faith in and devotion to the person of the Buddha are by no means wanting. Like a vibration of a pitch too high to be perceived as sound by human ears, the very delicacy and refinement of the emotional element in the Pali scriptures has perhaps caused it to escape attention. You know, if you're not tuned in to be able to hear it, and we're a long way away now, don't know what was resonating at a very subtle level of experience and energy, and I'll come on to those sort of qualities around the Buddha later. So for some people, just seeing the Buddha for the first time was a weighty experience, a memorable experience they sought in their minds. How do I describe this? So my example is from the Sutta Nipata, The Way to the Beyond. It's a very early sutta, and 16 experienced Brahmin students go on a long, long journey, following the instructions of their teacher to go to see the Buddha because they've heard of his reputation. And one of them includes Ajita, whose response we have. And so they arrive and have the first sight of, the Blessed One, it is called in the scriptures, the Blessed One. So imagine coming, arriving, sort of finding your way, and then seeing this figure. And there, with the order of monks gathered all around him, sat the Lord, the Blessed One. He was explaining the Dhamma to them. The lion was roaring in the jungle. Ajita saw the man full of enlightenment. It was like the sun shining without burning. It was like the moon bright and full on a full moon day. You can see, looking for descriptions, there's metaphors, voices like the lion's roar, and there are these comparisons with the sun and the moon. What was it like? And there's imagery, and it's not so precise, actually, so it sort of opens up the mystery of it. How can I describe this? This is wonderful. And I think, what is the effect on people themselves to see the Buddha, to hear the Buddha? And we just actually know through being around the Sangha and through our practice that people change through practice and through their development. And if you've seen somebody come back from a 3-month ordination retreat, they shine, they look different. And actually if somebody comes back from a 10-day ordination retreat, they shine and they look different. So the Buddha, after his enlightenment, what would his presence be like? And so they had an immediate response. What do you do? So without teaching, without explicit teaching, maybe without even conversation, there's an urge to do something, to express what's actually arising in your body, a sort of physical momentum and emotional momentum. So I'll read you a description of the response of Malika, the daughter of the garland maker. Pali Cannon was always very precise about people's jobs and their backgrounds. And this is her very first meeting with the Buddha. It's one of many meetings with the Buddha, but this is her very first. When she was leaving by the city gate, a group of ascetics came into town to obtain alms, and their leader stood out. One whose grandeur and sublime beauty impressed her so much that she spontaneously offered him all the food in her basket. The great ascetic was the Buddha, the awakened one. He let her put her offering in his bowl. After Malika, without knowing to whom she had given the food, had prostrated at his feet, she walked on full of joy. The Buddha smiled. So she still didn't actually know who it was. And I could say the word ascetic is being used here not in an extreme sense, which is somebody who was homeless, who was living without many of the ordinary pleasures of life. But she had this spontaneous response, deep devotion, joy. She became a disciple. It changed her life. Just that seeing, that moment. And her first urge was to give, which is very good. You know, the begging bowl invites giving. And that's one of its positive qualities. And she just put everything she had in the bowl, all the food she had. So for many, just to see the Buddha was enough, but also, of course, to hear him speak even, to welcome or to hear him teach, also had an effect on people, obviously a very strong effect on people. And pausing here, because I wrote in something else here, and I'll just come back to that. There's a very familiar quotation, which I'll read in a moment, which, in one level, you kind of think you understand. And just one day, in a particular frame of thinking, I looked at this and thought, this is too much. I don't really know what this means. And there's that sort of tremor of knowing that it's significant, and that's enough. It's often used with a masculine pronoun, so I've changed that to they, which is how the meaning of the word they has changed since these original translations. So, they who see the Dharma see me. This is the Buddha speaking. They who see the Dharma see me. They who see me see the Dharma. For it is when they see the Dharma that they see me, and it is when they see me that they see the Dharma. So I can't explain it, what it'd be like to glimpse this, but I must say in working on this talk, I think I really saw something more. But there's something here isn't about the ultimate truth of how things are and the human being mutually permeating each other, manifesting through each other. Yeah. Okay. So bearing that in mind, responses to the Buddha's words. Well, the Buddha's words and his teaching, of course, is very full. It comes in so many forms. And Vajradevi, in her talk, just used the Four Noble Truths as the kind of bedrock of the teaching. So let's bear that in mind. Whatever he would be teaching would be related to suffering, the cause of suffering, the end of suffering, and the noble path to lead from suffering. And for all of us in the human situation, what we look for, what all human beings actually look for, is the end of suffering and the path to lead to the end of suffering. And then there are moments when those people and us actually have a deep discovery or conviction that we know we see the path. And of course, whatever the Buddha said, the impact of the word, would be informed actually by his presence, the way he spoke, how he was, and that would touch the hearts of those who heard him. Because the era we're in now is not just about intellectual understanding with the mind, although that is important, it's really, really important, but it's also within our being, so it's what touches our emotional life, what we hold in our hearts, and that in itself, well, those two things give rise to volition, to doing something about it, to responding. So there's a very standard set of phrases for how many people responded to meeting the Buddha and hearing his words. So it nearly always comes out in the same format, and it's highly unlikely that everybody he met said the same thing. So this, one can say on one level, is the oral tradition, easier to learn it off by heart, easier to repeat it in that way, but also it has a certain quality. It's a bit like a liturgy. You know, the words are elevated actually by familiarity and repetition. So, the typical response to the words of the Buddha. And here the Buddha is called Gotama. It is amazing, Venerable Gotama. It is wonderful, Venerable Gotama. Just as if one might raise what has been overturned, or reveal what has been hidden, or point out the way to one who has gone astray, or hold out a lamp in the dark so that those who have eyes may see. I go to Master Gotama for refuge and to the Sangha. From today let Master Gotama remember me as a follower who has gone to him for refuge. It's beautiful. Sometimes the final lines change according to whether they're monks or laity and whether it's one person or more. But that moment of such deep meaning in their lives and that sense of rightness that, yes, something has fallen into place. So this isn't blind faith, and it's not just the magic of the moment, but each of them had in some way glimpsed that suffering can end. And there's a universal quality actually to those descriptions and images, like the light shining in the darkness. And we have a connection with that response because we chant the refuges and precepts. We express our wish to go for refuge to him and to the other three jewels. There's a flow of connection, of lineage, of continuing practice there over such a period of time and expansive space. And for all of us, I would think, in some way, either over a period of time or in a particular moment, there will be an experience of recognition of the significance of this and the wish to follow that path. And you may remember it very clearly, or you may kind of just notice how it's arisen and how it's deepened and what you're doing, and maybe it means more to come along to the centre than it used to, or so on. Okay, so I'm now going to go on to King Pasinadi. So in another sutta, King Pasinadi leaves his chariot, the trappings of all his wealth and position, and like a simple, ordinary man, walks on foot for the last stages to the lodging of the Buddha. And he's told by the monks that the Buddha will open the door to him. And on different levels, in a way, the Buddha opens the door to him. And so we have actually, first of all, his response on just seeing the Buddha. Okay, just as we had Malika's response. Having entered the dwelling, King Pasinadi bent low before the Blessed One, with his head on the ground, and kissed the Blessed One's feet, embracing them with his hands. I am Pasinadi, Lord, the King of Kosala. I am Pasinadi, Lord, the King of Kosala. So the Buddha has this huge reverence coming to him, and he's not self-conscious or embarrassed or flattered or any of those particular things, but he also doesn't take it for granted. He's not saying, oh great, fantastic, this is enough. So he's not just having a simple delight in the adoration of the king, but he asks really, what does this mean? What is your basis for doing this? Why are you doing this? So he says, but great king, what reason do you see for showing to this body such profound humility and for offering it such loving devotion? But he does see the quality, or sort of the emotional quality which is there, such profound humility, this is the king, and offering it such loving devotion. Now the king replies with a series of verses, and this is something else which happens very often in the Pali Canon when people have met the Buddha. Well, there's just so much that you can say, and you can never praise him enough. So there are quite a lot of passages, just a whole sequence of verses, and often looking around for images. You know, how can you describe this man? What is he like? And so on. So we'll have some of what King Pasinadi says in a moment. To express my grateful thanks, Lord, for that reason do I show to the Blessed One such profound humility and offer him my loving devotion. The Blessed One, Lord, lives for the welfare of the multitude, for the happiness of the multitude. He has established many people in the noble way and good and wholesome principles. It is for this reason, Lord, that I show to the Blessed One such profound humility and offer him my loving devotion. Again, Lord, the Blessed One is virtuous, of mature virtue, of noble virtue, of wholesome virtue. He is endowed with wholesome virtue. It is for this reason, Lord, that I show to the Blessed One such profound humility and offer him my loving devotion. Again, Lord, the Blessed One has been a forest dweller for a long time. He resorts to remote forest lands, to secluded dwellings. It is for this reason, Lord, that I show to the Blessed One such profound humility and offer him my loving devotion. Again, Lord, the Blessed One is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutation, being the unsurpassed field of merit for the world. It is for this reason, Lord, that I show to the Blessed One such profound humility and offer him my loving devotion. And I won't read more, but he continues and he talks about the Buddha as a meditator, about the dhyanas that the Buddha rises through, about the expansion of his consciousness, and the vision of the enlightenment that the Buddha has achieved. I included that last verse because those of you who know the true Ratnavandana may well recognise those lines. And the quotation we have for that last part is an unsurpassable source of goodness to the world, which is another of my favourite quotations. So the Buddha now knows that the profound humility of the king and the loving devotion are founded in clear understanding and wise discernment, and that makes the king's qualities beautiful, as well as the beauty of the Buddha's qualities. And I chose that passage also because what King Pasinadi says is really important. It tells us more about the Buddha. So he praises the qualities of the Buddha, and he praises his ethical practice. So the Buddha teaches in many ways, as Vajradevi explained 2 weeks ago, but one way that he teaches is by exemplification. So we may talk about ethics, but also he lives that life, the life of the ethics of the Dharma. And in King Pasinadi's language, that means his practice is mature, noble, and wholesome. And this ethical practice was radical and revolutionary at the time. Certainly in India, with the culture of the Brahmins, with animal sacrifice, believing that fire sacrifices could get you a good next life, or take you to some kind of ideal state after death, and also the beginning of the caste system. The Buddha doesn't belong to any class now. He is classless. There's a wonderful quotation, which I might not be able to find this moment, which I was going to use, where this is becoming contemporary, but the contemporary scholar Richard Gombrich talks about the Buddha, he uses the word ethicization, so the making ethical, that the Buddha's ethicization of the universe is a turning point in human history. Or it might be ethicization of the human world is a turning point in human history. Something like that. So ethics which comes from intention, arises from our states of mind, is very, very different to many ways of how we tell people that they should live. Also, King Pasinadi emphasizes the Buddha's compassion. He says he lives for the welfare of the multitude, for the happiness of the multitude, and he and his followers go forth and teach for the benefit of all beings. And that's really, really important. The Buddha teaches, walks miles to teach, teaches so much, but he teaches out of compassion, and he shares his wisdom out of compassion, and he exhorts his followers to do the same. So it's his love of all beings that he wishes to give them the Dharma. And we also have the Buddha's love of solitude. The king talks about the Buddha as a forest dweller who lives in remote forest lands. Well, actually, no one is actually in his presence then, but I think we can imagine, and it contributes to the overall presence, the sense of the being of the Buddha. The Buddha is always very clear that we don't go for refuge to nature. We don't go for refuge to hills and trees and so on. But what he exemplifies is a deep compassion for all living beings and a kind of empathy with the natural world, which sometimes has a sort of mutual responsiveness in it. His presence has an effect. Come on to that. And actually, we know how animals respond to somebody who is really good with animals. And we know how plants flourish in a well-loved garden. So it's not surprising that the presence of the Buddha causes unusual natural events, which can at times, at big moments in the Buddha's life, at his enlightenment or at his death, bring storm, lightning, drama, because, the nature, the world knows that something is happening. But one can also hold those things on a mythic, symbolic level if that feels easier. And the Buddha's love of animals, I'll give you two examples. One is a very large creature. The Buddha's cousin Devadatta tried more than once to kill the Buddha. So the Buddha wasn't always in straightforward situations, and he wasn't always surrounded by love. And it wasn't even the case that everybody who met him had the responses that I had, or was able to live from the responses that I gave. Devadatta was unsuccessful because whenever his followers met the Buddha, or someone was sent to kill the Buddha, or met the Buddha's disciples, they recognized the quality of the person that they were meeting, and they couldn't do it. So a late plan from Devadatta was to send a wild, murderous elephant into the path of the Buddha. And so the Buddha's disciples were all saying, "Oh no, don't go, there's this elephant down the path, don't go." And the Buddha went, and the elephant stopped, and the Buddha put his hand on the forehead of the elephant, and he talked to the elephant. and told the elephant, well, what was the best thing to do actually, and how the elephant could lead a good life. And the elephant was completely pacified. And then there's this lovely detail. The elephant, before it goes back to its stable and settles actually to its new life as well, the elephant took the dust of the Blessed One's feet with his trunk and sprinkled it on its own head. That's a lovely deal. I know this can feel like fable, but also who knows, just with the impact of the Buddha's presence. And either way, it's actually just holding a deep truth. The Buddha also cares a lot about little creatures. At one point, he discourages one of his disciples who wants to overturn and dig up the soil to find food which people really need. And the Buddha won't let him do it. And he says that you mustn't disturb that ground because the little creatures will be confounded. So these are the worms and the insects, and actually the creatures in our environmental understanding, which have only had a lot of understanding, I think, more recently. So the love of the Buddha for anything which is alive, and the respect of the Buddha for anything which is alive. And the forest was also his probably preferred personal space for meditation, where he could really experience the expansion of his consciousness. And it's from that he taught, it's from that he gave us our meditation practices. So yes, mindfulness, satipatthana, but also very importantly, loving kindness and the Brahma-viharas. And his vision of the Brahma-viharas, which are metta, compassion, rejoicing or mudita, and equanimity, are that they are utterly boundless, infinite, spreading in all directions. So this kind of just wonderful vision of human kindness and what it could be and the potential of the human heart. And our practices take us in that direction. So I think those who met the Buddha saw and experienced a being who had no fixed sense of self. And we talk about this a lot now. We have to find our language for it, and often we're not even quite sure how to describe it. Is it going beyond self? Is it going beyond a fixed self? Is it a flow? Oh, no, perhaps it's not a flow. Because in a way it's beyond our conventional language and beyond our thinking. But they saw this manifest. They saw it. And so we can imagine what this might be like. So I can only suggest something like a kind of fluidity of being, an easy flow to being over time. You know, things change, things move on, things happen, but there's no clinging around that. There's no dislike around that. There's nothing blocking this, and there's nothing blocking the flow of the Dharma within him. And in terms of space, there's some kind of flow, some kind of fluidity of connection, relationship, insubstantiality. Nothing hard, nothing fixed, nothing in the way, and this is true freedom. And from that position, the Buddha was just open. He had a very strong sense of gratitude. He had no sense of status. He knew who he was, and he would tell people who he was. But that wasn't to shore up any kind of sense of self. And from that, when he met people, he could just see them as they were. You know, because again, he wasn't caught up with what was going on for him or anything around that. He could see them as they were. He could look at them as they were. He had a gaze like an elephant. There's no personal agenda, just a free flow of love, compassion, and an intelligent awareness of how that person seemed to be. And he would respond in accordance with that. So it might be a lively debate with a Brahmin, it might be simple, kind words to meet a crisis, or it might be more poetic. And this is where I thought, oh yes, I understand that quotation from earlier, I understand this better. The Buddha just is the Dharma. The Dharma is the Buddha, and nothing gets in the way. So when you see the Buddha, you see the Dharma. And when you see the Dharma, you see the Buddha. So, carrying on just for a little bit longer with the presence of the Buddha. Well, the Buddha is, he's also a transcendental being. It's beyond ordinary experience. So there would also be a sense of mystery, beauty, wonder. He had more subtle levels of energy, I think, which is why he has this kind of relationship with nature and with all creatures. And you pick that up from his communications. On one occasion, asked a question, he just held up a single flower as a teaching. Came from a different position. And he can use beautiful language, verses, poetry. So, just give you one example of that. There's a well-known sutra about loving kindness, which says that it glows and shines and blazes forth. And the Buddha gives a number of similes for what that might be like. So it might be like the moon outshining the stars, the sun rising in a clear blue sky after the clouds of the monsoon, or it might be like the morning star after the darkness of the night. And it's beautiful, it's poetic. The repetition that loving kindness glows and shines and blazes forth is very inspiring. So that's an example from a longer teaching, but there are many teachings which end in a verse or verses. These are called udana. Udana is said to be an inspired or solemn utterance which is spontaneously evoked. It just happens in the Buddha, and it's breathed forth. That's what udana means, it's breathed forth. And I've also read it can come from intense joy or sadness in the Buddha. So there's something else which can happen where he speaks, as it were, with particular energy from a deeper space. And I imagine his voice would change. It might be close to chanting or closer to song, might even be those things. So I'll give you one example, because this is a famous one. It's a wisdom udana, really, but he's speaking about emptiness. So he's speaking from that expanded consciousness. And this, in a way, is the spirit of the Heart Sutra in about 6 lines. So this is what has arisen in the Buddha. Where water, earth, fire, air no footing find, there shine no stars, no sun is there displayed, there gleam no moon, no darkness there is seen. So when the sage, the Brahmana, by wisdom of his own self hath pierced unto the truth, from form and no form, pleasure and pain he's freed. So this is what the Buddha felt he had to say. And you can always imagine, the world vibrates to the tune, to the music of these words. And these kind of examples put us, I think, also in the space of Bante's quotation from much earlier. I've been talking about the Buddha, but also his followers living in that kind of atmosphere and expressing their devotion in that kind of atmosphere. So Bante's talked about certain pages of the Pali Canon that thrill with a quiet enthusiasm, or glow with a serene happiness, or flash out in dazzling ecstasy. And the sense, I think, of just that more subtle energy within the Buddha, or within a depth of spiritual practice. So I think coming back again in a way to the physical world, we think to affect the physical world we have to touch it, or construct machines and technology which will touch it. But actually from the presence of the Buddha, I think, and of his energy, things happen things happen, for example, in his relationship with nature, which doesn't need that basic sensuous stimulus. Okay, so just a couple more examples. This is a favourite sutta of mine, and it's the Mahagosinga Sutta, and it's about relationship between disciples, practitioners, and the setting where they are. So this is the followers of the Buddha in relationship to nature. So the most experienced, in the sutta, the most experienced of the Buddha's disciples go to the Gasinga Sala tree wood to meet Sariputra, one of the Buddha's two most senior disciples, and they want to hear the Dharma. Sariputra welcomes each of them individually as they arrive with the following words. Friend, the Gasinga Sala tree wood is delightful. The night is moonlit. The Sala trees are all in blossom, and heavenly scents float in the air. What kind of bhikkhu, friend, could illuminate the Gasinga Sala tree wood? And they each reply with a list of very fine qualities, which are actually their own qualities. So it's their individual variety, and Sariputra approves each of them, and finally goes to the Buddha and tells the Buddha, and the Buddha is very pleased. And what's happening, there's a whole wealth of qualities are being honoured, and they are rejoicing, they're taking a delight, this is gladness, this is mudita, and those qualities can also illuminate this already beautiful grove that they are in. So the grove will light up as well. There's this beautiful interplay between the human qualities and the natural qualities and the play of energy between them. So this is about atmosphere, beauty, mystery, mutual responsiveness. So one final example. When wonderful things happen and magical, mysterious things happen, you know, there's a beauty in that, but they can feel special. The Buddha makes very clear that you keep these things in perspective. So when he is very close to his death, he's old, he's ill. He describes his body as being strapped up. He's in the Sala Grove near Kusinara, and he speaks to Ananda. And this is, the advice that he wants to give, what he still wishes to emphasize. So, please, Ananda, prepare for me a couch between the twin Sala trees, with the head to the north. I am weary, Ananda, and want to lie down. So be it, Lord. And the Venerable Ananda did as the Blessed One asked him to do. Then the Blessed One lay down on his right side in the lion's posture, resting one foot upon the other, and so disposed himself mindfully and clearly comprehending. At that time, the twin Sala trees broke out in full bloom, though it was not the season of flowering, and the blossoms rained upon the body of the Tathagata and dropped and scattered and were strewn upon it in worship of the Tathagata. And celestial mandara flowers and heavenly sandalwood powder from the sky rained down upon the body of the Tathagata, and dropped and scattered and were strewn upon it in worship of the Tathagata. And the sound of heavenly voices and heavenly instruments made music in the air out of reverence for the Tathagata. And the Blessed One spoke to the Venerable Ananda, saying, Ananda, the twin Sala trees are in full bloom, though it is not the season of flowering, and the blossoms rain upon the body of the Tathagata, and drop and scatter and are strewn upon it in worship of the Tathagata. And celestial coral flowers and heavenly sandalwood powder from the sky rain down upon the body of the Tathagata and drop and scatter and are strewn upon it in worship of the Tathagata. And the sound of heavenly voices and heavenly instruments makes music in the air out of reverence for the Tathagata. Yet it is not thus Ananda that the Tathagata is respected, venerated, esteemed, worshipped, and honoured in the highest degree. But Ananda, whatever bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, layman or laywoman, abides by the Dharma, lives uprightly in the Dharma, walks in the way of the Dharma, it is by such a one that the Tathagata is respected, venerated, esteemed, worshipped, and honoured in the highest degree. Therefore, Ananda, thus should you train yourselves. We shall abide by the Dharma, live uprightly in the Dharma, walk in the way of the Dharma. So practicing the Dharma in our circumstances, in whatever way we can, is the most important thing that we can do. And as Vajradevi ended her talk with 2 weeks ago, in our lives, in this lifetime, we have had the very precious opportunity of meeting the Dharma, and we have the opportunity to live in accordance with it.